And I want to bring in someone special. This is Jason Dempsey, Adjunct Senior Fellow of the Military Veteran Society Program at the Center for a New American Security. And he's a military veteran deployed twice to Afghanistan. Now, Jason, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. So what's your understanding of what Afghanistan will be facing now that U.S. troops are out of there?
It's going to be very chaotic, and we should not assume that the war might be over for us, but it's not over for Afghanistan. And one thing we have to remember is the Afghan government, we didn't expect it to collapse as quickly as it did, and I would say neither did the Taliban. And now we have to watch the Taliban try to figure out how to transition from an effective fighting force to an effective governing force. And so there's a lot at play now.
Now I want to talk about casualties, and specifically civilian casualties. We heard about that during that strike. How do you think that Americans who are listening to that should take that information? Is it inevitable that civilians will lose their lives during this conflict, or is it something else?
Civilians have been losing their lives year after year after year, and the Afghan population has borne the brunt of our fighting. And it's one of the reasons why the Afghan population slowly turned and said, well, we don't trust the Afghan government that much. We're in the midst of conflict. The Taliban seem to be winning. And so a lot of them said, you know what, we're willing to go back to that just for a modicum of stability. They've always been central to this. And now for us, what we have to keep in mind, as we saw, and what has been happening, what I hope the American public realizes, when we were dropping more bombs in 2019 than we had through any other part of the war, we were doing it without American troops on the ground. And people like to think, well, that's low cost. Well, I'll tell you, all those bombs definitely came with a cost. While we were probably killing a lot of Taliban, a lot of enemy forces, we also killed a lot of civilians. And we didn't have people on the ground explaining why that was going on. So it was easy for our enemies to take that and use it against us as propaganda victories.
Now let's talk about diplomacy and diplomats. Anthony Blinken saying that it's unlikely they will keep diplomats in Afghanistan. Good idea or bad idea, and why?
At this point, absolutely the right idea, because now everything that happens in Afghanistan hinges on the outlook and the temperament of the Taliban and what they're going to do. So we have not as many levers as we used to have. We've taken the military lever off the table, and now it's all about diplomacy. The Taliban want nothing more than international recognition. International recognition brings them outside funding. It brings them a measure of respectability in the international community. They want that. And so it would not be in our interest to give them recognition by establishing an official diplomatic presence at this time. What the UN passed last night were some very clear guidelines, and hopefully the Taliban will recognize that they need to let people flow out, they need to let humanitarian aid flow in, and that we're all looking at them to take care of the terrorists in their midst, and at least make some gestures about protecting human rights. Until we see some movement or something in the right direction on that, we absolutely should withhold our diplomatic presence.
Now, I want to ask you, as an American and also as a veteran, what are your biggest concerns now that we have left Afghanistan?
My primary concern is we just executed Vietnam 2.0, but we did a lot of things worse than we did in Vietnam. And a lot of that stems from a public that is entirely indifferent to what we were doing for 20 years. It's not like things were hidden, they just weren't making headline news. The way we prosecuted this war was riddled with error. We built a house of cards when we built the Afghan National Security Forces, yet we poured billions upon billions of dollars into that effort. And we did things that most of your viewers, if they saw a proposal to do something similar in their civilian walk of life, they would absolutely reject it and fire whoever made that proposal. But yet it's that indifference from the public that allowed us to make those mistakes year after year after year after year. So my main concern is that we're going to get another few days, a 9/11 commemoration on this. But aside from people posturing to score quick political points or confirm prior held convictions, nobody's going to really peel back the layer and say, how do we hold people accountable for this failure, and how do we actually prevent it from happening again?
Jason Dempsey, Adjunct Senior Fellow of the Military Veterans and Society Program at the Center for New American Security, sir. And he's also a military veteran. Thank you for your service. Thank you so much for being on this show, sir.